Hello, my name is Jeff Mann, and I teach here at Susquehanna University. Many of you know how opinionated I am, but my students don't know what I think. In my classes, we discuss and debate all sorts of controversial issues, including some of the really big ones that fire up people's emotions: abortion, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the ethics of Halloween costumes, and each semester, there are students who tell me that it drives them crazy not knowing where I stand on these issues. This makes me smile. Some of them know I'm a Republican, but Republicans are hardly a monolith. We disagree with each other on religious and ethical issues, political and economic policies, boxers and briefs. Knowing that I'm a Republican might give them an inkling of my opinions, but they're smart enough to know that they can't pigeonhole me. I tell them, knowing I'm a Republican tells you I like smaller government and I change my mind slowly. Cool. It doesn't tell you anything else about my views. You're not going to guess my opinion on transgender issues because of my party affiliation. And it's not that I'm silent on the topics we engage in class. I argue for all sorts of things. I'll be pro-life one day and pro-choice the next. I tell them from the first day of class, what you hear me defending in class is not necessarily what I actually believe. I might believe it, I might not. Sometimes I'm throwing out flawed arguments to see if you can catch the error. And sometimes I'm just batting an idea around in my head and I want to see what you think. Help me identify its strengths and weaknesses, where it holds up and where it has flaws. Why do I take this approach? I do it because, after considerable thought, I believe it's the best way to teach. If students know the professor holds a viewpoint contrary to their own, they are far more likely to keep their own opinions to themselves. Now, most professors won't penalize a student unfairly for holding a different opinion on affirmative action or the legalization of marijuana, but I understand why students don't want to risk it. Better safe than sorry, when your grade is on the line. There's also the unpleasant experience of having a professor crush a student in debate when that student dared to contradict the classroom orthodoxy. Sure, you can express your opinions, right before I demolish them in front of everyone. And I've heard of this happening from time to time. Professors who claim their classrooms welcome all viewpoints. Sure, they're welcome right before they're attacked by the professor. And then they better not be brought up again after the truth has been presented. At the same time, if there are students who know that the professor shares their own opinion on one of these issues, that's not good for the student's education either. They sit comfortably, taking it in, knowing they're on the side of the angels. The discomfort of being challenged with new ideas, which is absolutely necessary for intellectual growth, is simply removed. They can echo the professor, write down a few additional arguments, but they're not engaged in critical thinking. When my students don't know my opinion on the subject matter of the day, and I've already communicated that all positions are welcome, as long as they're expressed in a civil manner, they feel much more at ease. They don't have to fear making a public challenge to something I've said, because who knows? I might actually agree with them. When my students don't know my opinion on the subject matter of the day, and I've already communicated that all positions are welcome as long as they're expressed in a civil manner, they feel much more at ease. They don't have to fear making a public challenge to something I've said, because who knows? I might actually agree with them. And they can't feel like they get a free pass because of their position, because I'll challenge any of them, even if I happen to agree with them. And I reserve the strongest pushback for the students most intellectually and emotionally prepared for it, regardless of their views. I've been teaching classes that engage highly contentious and emotional issues for 2 decades. But I find my students are willing and able to debate the merits of various positions with respect and civility as long as the stage is set for them to do so. The only students who get upset, I've found, are the ones who expect a political orthodoxy to be the norm that's enforced, that I'm there to advance and defend. But as I explain every semester, there is no favored position. I'm not sure where these students get this idea or have seen it in practice, but it is contrary to the norms of higher education. Okay, that's not true. In many cases, I know exactly where they've seen it and had it modeled for them. Now, I can hear my postmodern friends saying, wait, let's not pretend you can obtain perfect objectivity when you present and discuss these issues. By virtue of the language you use and the narrative you rely on, you are advancing your own personal view and vantage point, whether you want to or not. Well, guess what? You're absolutely right. Well, you're right to a degree. There is a serious concern that arises when you try to teach without sharing your opinions. Students might assume they're getting a truly fair and objective perspective, but our biases can and do slip in, despite our best intentions. When I teach the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I try my best to be objective and fair. But let's be honest, and tip our hats to the postmodernists. Pure objectivity is impossible, especially on an issue like that. That's why, after my presentation, I admit to them my own bias. Quite forthrightly, I'll tell them, I've tried my best to be as objective as I can in my treatment of this issue, but you are still getting it from a single individual who has a bias. I'm not strongly pro-Israel, I'm not strongly pro-Palestine, but my own position does lean in the direction of blank. And I tell them. I'm just not telling you. Admitting this to them then is honest, and it's a good historiographical lesson as well. At the same time, dear postmodernists, you guys can sometimes take things too far. I've been at this stuff long enough that I can present multiple sides of many issues without bias. And the fact that we engage in detailed and nuanced debates on the ethics of abortion every semester and my students still don't know my opinion on the subject means that it can be done. But what really annoys me are the sloppy postmodernists who say, well, pure objectivity is impossible, so I won't even try. I'll just ram my own views down their throats directly. It's just more honest that way. I've actually heard this sort of approach, and while what I've done is paraphrase it, it's probably a more accurate depiction of what's going on. Because we can't be perfectly objective doesn't mean we shouldn't work toward greater objectivity. We don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. Now, am I saying that all professors must do what I do? Not allowing their students to know their opinions on the basis of their teaching? No, although I'll admit that I wish a lot more would. One of the finest teachers in my time here at Susquehanna, over in the political science department, would always let students know where she stood on politics. Yet, she also created a classroom environment where everyone knew they were welcome to bring their own views and share them. But to create that environment of trust, she did a heck of a lot more than just declare all opinions are welcome. Talk is cheap. Nearly every college professor in the country claims to have such a policy in their classrooms, but many fail to actually deliver such an environment. Doing so is hard. You can't just say it. It takes serious work. I have another colleague, the walking caricature of an old, curmudgeonly, left-wing, tree-hugging, self-righteous academic. He even has a picture of Karl Marx on his office door. Although, truthfully, I taped it there. Anyway, he's known for mocking me, prattling on about the environment incessantly, and bitching about Fox News. At the same time, I've known some of his students, members of the SU Republicans, who love the guy. I don't understand that. Somehow, despite his persona, he creates a welcoming environment, even for those right-wing students who he openly teases. I think he's communicated to them and all his students that he really cares about them and their education, but he's going to have some fun at their expense. But these folks are the exception. I hear from students very often who tell me it's just easier to tell the professor what he or she wants to hear. And that is simply not an option when you don't know what the professor thinks on any of the issues. That's why I believe students are best served, feel most free, are challenged most consistently, and get the best education when their professor's personal views remain a mystery to them. Thank you.